Hi guys, it is Gracie and Scott with Small Worlds Big Adventures, and it has been a minute. Beyond us just taking some time to take care of personal life stuff, we got some pretty amazing art from our friends over at Artisanal Ajax. Look how cute our figures are. They're adorable. And we are ready to have them react to some amazing D&D and other tabletop role-playing stories. So this story is from r/rpghorror stories. DM kicks me out of the group because I looked up a spell. And just a little trigger warning, it does get into mentioning suicide, and we will touch on it a bit. So if that is not a comfortable subject for you, you can go ahead and skip to the next bookmark.
And hopefully we have more.
Okay, so this happened about 6 months or so ago, and I'm not asking for solutions, but just sort of a feedback sort of thing, because I feel like I am in the right. So I am in a campaign with 6 people, counting the DM, and it's going well-ish. The DM, we'll call her Sally, is a very roleplay heavy DM. I don't have a problem with it. It just becomes tiring when she takes control of your player and does actions for you. It doesn't happen normally, maybe every other session. That's very often. But she is very prone to kicking people out. For instance, one of the younger players in our group who was still time managed by her parents was kicked out because she was picked up earlier than the end time. I obviously don't agree with this, but not enough to protest. After around 4 to 6 months of playing in the campaign, I'm enjoying the storytelling overall, and I do want to stay in the group. Sally and I were friends outside of the campaign, and she, out of the blue one day, sends me this whole chain of texts saying she's going to off herself. I comfort her to the best of my abilities, and life goes on. One particular session, our party is on a boat headed for a large city when a large kraken thing is attacking us. One of the mentor/guide NPCs uses a spell I don't know whilst in combat, Disintegrate. So while another player is thinking about what he'll do on his turn, I look it up in the player's handbook. I see that it does 40d6 damage. I show it to my friend sitting next to me, and he is just as surprised as I am. Sally sees this and asks what it is, so I show her, and she goes off on me. She tells me I'm not allowed to do that during combat because I could, quote, use counterspell on it. I have 2 points to this, them being, 1, that the NPC is our teammate. Why would I cast counterspell on it? And 2, if we assume that I did want to cast counterspell for some reason, I would probably cast it already because of the name, like Disintegrate. I am kicked out of the group, and I'm not even mad. I just don't understand why. So I ask, and she gives me a speech on how it's super disrespectful, but I don't see how it is. Can anyone help? Edit. Sally has, I'm never sure, it's BPD. But I'm not sure if that's bipolar disorder or borderline personality disorder, but one of those. And had a 3 strikes you're out type of rule. Except in my case, for whatever reason, completely bypassing strike 2 and going to 3. Asking about it later, I found out that I had a 2nd strike already for something I didn't even do. I think she also has control issues. No. If this is something that is from BPD, tell me please. I'm not friends at all with her anymore, and not being friends with her let me see how manipulative she was. Sally and I had an argument about a week or so before the session, so that might have been something to do with it. So what are your thoughts, Scott?
I mean, it's hard to say. Sometimes we don't know the people involved in these stories, and it's hard to sometimes know what's going on. And he brings up BPD as a possible issue, and certainly control issues. Mm-hmm. Some of this could read as a DM who is very new to DM.
Sure.
You want and expect a little more control over the story that you think that you are crafting, and could explain the taking control of somebody else's, the player's characters, which generally should be it's a pretty bad red flag and should generally be a no-no. The thing about like, oh, why are you looking up the spell that my guy's casting? But part of the answer to that is, why did she say what the name of the spell was without describing what it did anyways? If the player characters aren't supposed to know what the spell is, why would you say the name of it?
Yeah.
Because then all that does is give them the opportunity to look it up. If for some reason you didn't want them to look it up, don't say the name, just describe what happens.
Yeah.
That feels like a beginner DM mistake, if that's what you care about. As a more experienced DM, I just generally assume that my players, while I know that's not true, know what all spells and all monsters, at least their basic stats are.
Yeah.
Because at this point, it's super easy to get all that information in and out of the game and online and everything. And when you've played for a while, you'll just kind of know what most of the spells do and what most monsters each other can and can't do, at least the more common ones. And if you're deep in the game and look up stuff outside of that, you'll know basically everything.
Yeah.
So to expect them to not know what the disintegrate spell was seemed weird to me. If you're going to let, I have to assume the DM let them know what the name of the spell was, and then to get angry over that just seemed weird. BPD aside, that feels more like just a rookie GM mistake more than anything else. But if they have control issues over stuff and people are looking up stuff, it can feel like they're undermining you in the middle of a game. I understand that. I don't buy into that really. I'd much rather my players took a more mechanical interest in the game than certainly most of the people I play with do.
I think what kills me is not even like this whole issue, which is seriously flawed in my opinion. It's a stupid reason to kick someone out. She mentions that like she got 2 strikes before and it's a 3-strike rule. She doesn't say what the first strike is or even what the second one was, even though she said that happened. But like kicking out the young player who doesn't have time autonomy is a shitty move.
Yeah.
And says that like you're not in the game for community building. Because then, like, you would try to be considerate of your players.
Right. It also kind of points to rookie GM stuff, because if you're a GM who's been playing for a while, you, at this point, have to understand, especially in person, how hard it is to get 4+ people together in the same amount of time, and are frequently working around that in some fashion. People will have to show up late or have to leave early or won't be able to make it to a session, and then you have to decide, are we moving the session or are we playing without the person? Like, that is just unfortunately the way things are. If you're a bunch of high schoolers and you don't have jobs, it's a lot easier to get together at a regular time all together. And I don't know if they said what their ages were here.
No, they don't.
I tend to assume most people are on the older side because I'm on the older side. I assume 20s would be my guess for these people. But it just, unfortunately, once you are living adult lives and have jobs and responsibilities, it is just really hard to get that many people together on a regular basis. We struggle with that frequently in our groups.
Yeah, and I mean, there's always a weird power dynamic, I feel like, in this. Again, like, you've always been my DM. Well, not always, but 99% of my games, you've been my DM. But, like, a DM never has to find players. But players kind of have to fight for their spot at the table for a DM.
Sure.
So that feels like an abuse of power of like just like kicking people out.
Oh yeah.
And it sounds like for not very serious strikes at that, this person, didn't cross a homophobic or racist or anything like that line.
Murder hoboing.
Yeah.
Or disrupting the gameplay. Yeah. Sure.
They didn't make fun of other players or criticize people at the table. There is a comment from After29804. Hey, I'm a therapist in real life. OP, I can tell by the context here that you and everyone else in the story must be quite young. Teenagers, I assume. So, feels like right what you were saying.
Fair.
This sort of behavior is indeed something present in many people with untreated or poorly managed BPD. While the suicidal gesture, we didn't even talk about that.
Yeah.
Gesture/text could be attention-seeking maneuver, they should still be taken seriously. People with BPD are at risk, at an increased risk for death by suicide, and even if she didn't have that diagnosis, my answer would remain the same. You need to tell her parents. Show them the text messages if you have them. She will likely lash out, and that's okay. Sounds like she doesn't want to be friends with her anymore anyways. And if she does indeed lash out at you, you need to not engage further. What's important is you do what you can, and in this case, that's involving her family, and they can get her the help she needs. So this person was focusing on that suicide aspect of it.
No, and that's fair, and I think also very valid. Suicide is not something to be taken lightly. If somebody is, even if they're using it as a manipulation tactic, it's not something. I'm not a licensed therapist or psychologist or anything like that, but it is something that I take super seriously.
For sure.
People who have been close to, and then also people whose lives tangentially touched mine have committed suicide, and it is not something that I take lightly. We didn't comment it mostly because I can't really comment on her, the GM's mental state as far as like a BPT or anything like that. So it's a little, that's not really much there for me to comment on. But that's I think a really good comment is you probably should tell the parents or somebody important in their lives or whatever, because if they're either using that as manipulation or just even casually throwing it around, that should probably be addressed.
Yeah. I mean, I think the big takeaway here is, one, she is already kicked out of the group, but should find a better playing group to play with that's more supportive of her, and at least explains like why they view that as kind of like a strike or a violation or whatnot. And then she does it again, like then it's like a real strike or whatever. I think it's a stupid strike, but you should be happy and not stressed playing with the people you play with.
It wouldn't have solved this issue, but I do think that it could have helped a little bit. And we've discussed this before, and we will discuss this again. But a session 0 that also describes things like this is the attitudes and responsibilities that I expect at my table would have helped some of this going forward. Maybe a discussion of occasionally I will want to take control of your character to help advance the story. I don't think I would have played in a group that was discussed in a session 0. Sometimes it depends on what you're doing, but I don't think it would have resolved this situation. And this feels too much that for even that, and maybe they had one but didn't discuss some of these things, but it is something that you maybe ought to think about discussing in your session 0. And I hope OP finds a better group.
Yeah. And if they are young, they got time.
Yep.
This story is from RPG Horror Stories. From One Moment of Weakness. Session cancels 2 hours before it's scheduled. Happens twice. I have a big group. 9 players. That is a big group. We're what, 7?
8.
8 players.
We've done 8.
Both times I was supposed to be the host. 7 players had RSVP'd for the session. 1 player cancels 1 day before the session. Then 1 player cancels, and then another, until we're down to 3 players. The same thing happens the second time, except the first player canceled 2 days before, and we're down to 4 players. It seems that players don't care that much, and I feel stupid for investing so much of my time in this. Some reasons have been valid, like work or being sick, but some have been double booking or just not in the mood. I'm tired. For me, because they don't say they're the DM, they just say they're hosting.
Yeah.
And I am the person who hosts Dungeons and Dragons, and you are the DM.
Sure.
And it can be so frustrating for that, because especially if you're planning for a big group.
Yeah.
Like, we cook for our players, we have snacks for our players. And on top of that, we clean the house, like, it's nobody's business.
There's a big time investment in hosting, especially that many people.
Yeah. So I totally understand the disappointment of, like, I've put all this time and energy into this, and now it's either not happening or it's only happening with a few people. And financially that can be kind of an issue too. I definitely going way back, I once started at a dinner party and there were so many maybes, and I had planned like like almost counting meals planned.
Mm-hmm.
I had like an entire pan of chicken cutlets.
Yeah.
It was the saddest thing in the whole world because like no one showed up.
It was just a handful of people out of what we thought could have been as many as like 20 or 25 or something. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That were invited.
And so for me now, like even when I'm planning stuff that like will just keep.
Yeah.
Or I can like cut down how much is made and the rest will be shelf stable and whatnot.
Yeah.
It's still super disheartening though.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts?
Basically to discuss this is one of the reasons this is all, but this is a very specific thing. Actually, it's kind of two things going on in here. So one is definitely the sometimes your sessions get canceled because people can't make it, and that can be rough. And you got to decide what to do, especially if you're the DM, because in a lot of ways you were kind of leading that group. So now you've got to decide, well, if two people can make it, maybe we do a board game night. Maybe we watch a movie, whatever your group kind of enjoys outside of the game. Maybe we do something like that, or maybe you just cancel it together. Like I said, if you spent time putting together snacks and stuff, it kind of sucks that now over the next week your meals are all snacks instead of getting to spend them with
I don't know. A
friends.
snack week is pretty good.
It's
not good for you.
It's not good for you. It can be fun, but maybe you turn that around with the few people that can show up into something still fun and entertaining. A lot of times. Because life is busy, especially as an adult. If enough people cancel, we'll just cancel out because that means even if you don't count the time that we did put into preparing, that still gives us some time back to do other projects or things that we maybe need to do. I do think in kind of discussing this, I'm not sure. Do they say what game they're playing? Do they say they're playing Dungeons and Dragons?
That's kind of like my assumption.
Yeah, that's the general assumption for a lot of these if they don't specify something else. Although it almost doesn't even really matter. That is a lot of people.
It's so many people.
These games are not designed for that many people at the end of the day. The gamekeeper and 4 to 5 really is what most games are designed for. If you've got that big a group, in general, speak to anybody's specific circumstances, but I can speak to my own, certainly. A few of those players are going to be the stars of the show. Sometimes that'll be different from week to week, but in general, especially if it's a big story-based campaign, it'll be a few of them, and then a lot of people that are secondary characters, essentially. And if you're that for a long period of time, and then you see somebody says, well, I can't make it this week, you're like, well, I can probably stand to skip a week. With that many people, it's easy to see a whole bunch of people basically like dominoes going, yeah, I'm just not going to show up because, while I do enjoy playing, it's not that great, and I'm just not going to do it. And I'm not saying that's what's going on here, but like it's easy to see that. I always suggest try and keep your groups down to 4 or 5 players. Everything gets a lot tighter. It's a lot easier to get that many people together on a consistent basis. If one person drops out, sadly, if one person drops out, sometimes you can't afford to lose one player even in a campaign, depending on what you're doing, and you're going to have to cancel. But like in his example, this one person dropped out, and then they couldn't play anyways because more and more people started dropping. So my advice is always just fewer players is unfortunate. It doesn't scale well past about 4 or 5 people.
Well, and I do think there's something that we haven't touched on, and this isn't something I have to deal with as the host and not the DM. But like, if you're planning combats for 9, 8, 7, I'm not sure how hard it is to do the quick math to get it down to 4 or 3.
Yeah, as you get more experience, that gets easier. A lot of times it's just either lower hit points on certain things or kick certain monsters out of the fight, and then usually it'll be okay. You're probably doing a little more fudging because you're kind of off the cuff, essentially replanning those encounters. But once you've done it a few times, it's not terrible. But yeah, it's something to think about. Is like it happens. Rewards is another good example. You've got to think about how rewards going to be divvied up for 9 players versus now all of a sudden for some reason there's only 5 players. Do the other players who weren't there, should they get a cut of the reward? Should I set something aside for them? Like you do end up with a lot of these weird questions that come up. I think we may have discussed it a little bit before too, but also if you play without a player because they can't make it but you still want to play, then like how do you resolve their character either being there and played by somebody else, or just kind of standing in the background, or just kind of not being there, but now they're back the next week. Like, there's a lot of questions about how you kind of resolve that, and there's no wrong or right answer, but there's also not really any easy answers for those either. Usually we just kind of ignore that they're gone, and then just when they come back, pretend that nothing happened.
Yeah.
But, that's different from different groups.
Duck-billed Waterplus. High five for the name. Love that. Trying to coordinate 9 adults is like herding cats. I'm amazed you even managed to set a date. Cut down the group size, see if it makes things better. Also, tip from the theater world, have people cancel directly with you, not on the group chat. People seeing other people canceling makes them more likely to cancel.
Yeah, all of that. 100% agree.
High five for that great advice. Definitely like herding cats. We've been trying to futz with how long we play, what days we play, and all that. And it really hasn't had that great of an impact on how more often we play. We still end up playing about once a month.
Yeah.
So sometimes it's what it is.
Yep. Yeah. They bring up a good point, which we kind of talked about. It's just, especially if you're kind of only half in or half interested, once somebody else has dropped out, that is all the excuse you need to go, yeah, I can't make it then either.
Yep.
And it's like leaving a party. Once somebody has broken that opening the front door and leaving, then it's fine for everybody else to go. Somebody needs to be the first, but then everybody's got an excuse. They weren't the first to go, so
that's right.
They're not the bad guy.
May we always be the first.
That's fairly frequently we are.
It's quite funny. We have a joke. We have friends that we'll often go to social gatherings with, but we're always like the first ones done for the night, and we always miss the most interesting thing that happened that night.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure if we are the blessing or the curse in that case, but it is funny. All right. To listen to more D&D horror stories, gaming topics, Reddit stories in general that have to do with gaming, you can go ahead and subscribe. If you hit the notification bell, you'll be notified the next time we upload. If you have questions for our excellent resident DM, Scott, you can drop them below and he will be happy to answer them. But if there's nothing else,
hit that like button. That really helps a lot.
Oh, that does help a lot. But then if there's nothing else,
we'll see you next time.
Love it.